On behalf of the elected officials of Floyd County and the Clerk of Court, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Floyd County Courthouse for what promises to be a memorable event. Get settled in, get comfortable. We're going to be in this room for almost an hour, and then we're going to retire to the second floor, and we're going to hang these historical documents in the print. And then there's going to be some tours given by former County Recorder Meredith Monroe. And we're coming back up here for cake and refreshments. During the past 10 days, these historical documents have made quite a trip through Floyd County. 6 Floyd County elected officials, including County Attorney Rachel Jinby, County Attorney, County Auditor Gloria Carr, County Recorder Deb Roberts, County Sheriff Rick Lynch, County Treasurer Frank Rottinghouse, myself, and Chief Deputy Jeff Crooks made 10 presentations at 5 area schools to 330 students and the Charles City Lions Club. Oh, what a great time we had. We talked about what this day means and what the future holds for all of us. At this time, I'd like to introduce an official from each school who present today, who will introduce their students. Representing Central Springs Schools is teacher Adam Hines.
I'm Adam Hines. I have with me today Connor O'Donnell, who is a 6th grader, Cameron Ocris, who is a 6th grader, and Cole Avery, who is a 7th grader.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hines. From Charles City Community Schools, Ryan Rawman.
Hi, I'm with my history technology class here today, so they're going to be doing a little filming as well. Guys, can we just kind of go through and just say your first name and turn and smile quickly?
Riley, Matt, Monica, Kara, Madison, and
Are there other teachers here present from your school? Anyone else you'd like to introduce?
Hey, I'm Rob Pittman. I'm from the high school here, and if the ladies that came with me could stand up. And all of these people contributed essays or artwork, and starting with Katie, she'll say hi and say her full name.
Hi, I'm Katie Foster. I'm Sarah Wilson, Stephanie Lawrence, Jordan Monroe, Sarah Richards, Gordon Kellogg, Kelsey Marr, Chantal Renald.
Thank you very much. We're also pleased to have Dr. Dan Cox, Superintendent of Charles City Schools, here with us today. And Pat Rottinghouse. You want to come? From Red Rockford Marble Rock School, Superintendent Keith Turner.
We're here with our middle school student council and their sponsor, Deanne Elan. If you can just tell your names and turn around and let everybody see you.
I'm Avery. I'm Jenna. David, Lauren,
Jake.
Blake, Sydney, Kayla, Taylor, Nicole Presley, Brett.
Yeah, thank you, guys. I was thrilled when I found one of my favorite Martin Luther King Jr. quotes included in the collage of photographs created by Mr. Longore's 5th grade class at Red Rockford Marble Rock. The collage, I'm going to show it to you when we go downstairs, is entitled All Are One. And I want to show you that. But the quote that I like says, "Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" The recipients of the following award have met that calling. Keisha Cummings and Shakitra Parks of the Proud Parents Association, please come forward. For each of the past 3 years, the Proud Parents Association, under the leadership of these two volunteers, have raised money from local businesses to give 300 backpacks and school supplies to kids who need it. They've sponsored three movies at Charles Theater. They provided a scholarship for a senior at Charles City High School. They sponsored a chalk walk in downtown Charles City that allowed students to express their creativity in a positive way. And the Proud Parents Association also adopts a local family in need at Christmas. They've done it all, not for self-recognition, but for others. Representative Todd Pritchard personally helped the Proud Parents Association get set up as a nonprofit and guided them along their way. Representative Pritchard is in service at the state capitol right now, so he's unable to be here. But here's what he says in his certificate of recognition. Having been brought to the attention of the Honorable State Representative Todd Pritchard that Keisha Cummings and Kakitra Parks deserve recognition for outstanding work and dedication to the Proud Parents Association. Now therefore, in consideration of the foregoing, the undersigned do hereby extend congratulations on this day in January 2015. Keisha? At this time, I'd like to invite County Attorney Rachel Jinby tonight.
Good afternoon. I have the honor of introducing to you the Honorable Justice Edward Mansfield. He is from Des Moines and was appointed to the Iowa Supreme Court in 2011. Justice Mansfield was born and raised in Massachusetts. He received his undergraduate degree from Harvard in 1978 and his law degree from Yale in 1982. After law school, he clerked for the U.S. Court of Appeals in the Fifth Circuit. Justice Mansfield worked as an attorney in private practice until his appointment to the Iowa Court of Appeals in 2009. Justice Mansfield also has been an adjunct professor of law at Drake University since 1997. Justice Mansfield is a member of the Iowa State Bar Association, having served as chair of the Table Regulation Section from 2004 to 2006. He is a member of the Polk County Bar Association and the Iowa Judges Association. Justice Mansfield also serves on the board of directors of Goodwill Industries of Central Iowa and is a past chairperson of this organization. He is also married and has 3 children, and his current term on the court expires on December 31st of 2020. And so with that, I welcome Justice Mansfield.
Everyone, I've been asked to talk about Iowa's historic civil rights cases. So I'm going to talk about 3 people, a lead miner named Ralph, a schoolgirl named Susan Clark, and a school teacher named Kogan. And they are the 3 heroes of Iowa's earliest and most famous civil rights cases. Let's start with Ralph. Ralph is the very first decision, we're very proud of it, of the Iowa Supreme Court. If you go to our reports, and there's a set back there, they've been rebound, so they're in a little bit better condition back there than the one in our library. And you go back to the very first volume from when Iowa was still a territory, you find the case of In re Ralph. This case was decided in 1839. But the story really started in 1834. Ralph was a slave in Missouri, which was then a slave state. This time Iowa, as I mentioned, was a territory. Ralph's owner agreed that Ralph could buy his own freedom and let him move to Iowa in return for Ralph's agreement to pay $550, which was then that would be about $15,000 now, so that was a substantial sum of money. Ralph moved to Iowa and went to work in the lead mines near Dubuque. But he fell behind on his payments to his former master. And his former master sent bounty hunters to Iowa to reclaim him. Ralph was apprehended, and then he filed what we call in our judicial system a petition for writ of habeas corpus, to be free. And the case went to our Supreme Court, and we ruled that Ralph was a free man. We said he came to Iowa, and under the legislation that historians call the Missouri Compromise, or the Compromise of 1820, territory north of the boundary between Missouri and Iowa is free territory. Slavery is outlawed in that territory, and therefore, once Ralph moved there, whether he had this debt to his former owner or not, he was a free man. Now, the irony of this case is that about 2 decades later, the very same issue that we had decided in Iowa came before the United States Supreme Court in what was called the Dred Scott case, a notorious case considered to be one of the worst decisions the United States Supreme Court has ever made. Dred Scott involved another fellow who was a slave in Missouri, who then spent many years in the North. He accompanied his owner to Illinois and then to what is now Minnesota, and then he returned to Missouri. His owner died, and he was sold to be somebody else's slave, and he sued for his freedom. He said, wait a minute, I lived in these free states for so many years. I wasn't a slave then, and I'm not a slave now. And the United States Supreme Court, in a controversial, divided decision, said no. It said that the U.S. Constitution, which says that nobody shall be deprived of property without due process of law, actually protected the slave owner who had owned Dred Scott, because Dred Scott was his property. And therefore, when Congress made the territories north of Missouri free, that law was unconstitutional and had no effect on the particular case. So very same issue that we decided Ralph went the other way in the Dred Scott case in 1857. This was a very decision that sparked outrage in the North, and it was one of the triggers that led to the Civil War 4 years later. Abraham Lincoln spoke vehemently against that decision. He made the famous speech where he said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." He drew the lesson from that case that this country could not remain half slave and half free. And in fact, after the Civil War, that was no longer the case. But it took the Civil War for, in effect, the vision that the Iowa Supreme Court had in the Ralph case to become reality. So that's Ralph. Now we come to our second case, which is Clark versus the Board of Directors. And we're now in 1868. Still very much in the infancy of our state. Susan Clark was a 12-year-old African-American girl. And she and her father wanted her to go to the neighborhood school in Muscatine, Grammar School number 2 it was called. But, and so September 10th, which I guess back then was the beginning of the school year, they didn't have to worry about the state fair or this. She presented herself at the school, and the school refused to admit her. And the school board said, there is, and I'm quoting from the decision, there is a separate school for colored children in a comfortable building with proper furniture and a competent teacher. And the school board even said, if she wants to take grammar, We'll even create a grammar class in that school if you want. So she sued, and her father sued. And the trial court ruled against her, but the case was appealed and came up to our Supreme Court. And our Supreme Court said that was not satisfactory, that was not adequate. The Iowa Constitution, we pointed out, declares that provision shall be made for the education of all the youths of the state through a system of common schools. So all means all, common means common, and therefore we're not going to allow a separate system of segregated schools in Iowa. Now again, this was a decision that was probably ahead of its time, definitely ahead of its time. In an infamous case known as Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896, the U.S. Supreme Court, in effect, decided the same issue the other way. That court decided that Louisiana could set up separate rail cars and require African Americans to use one set of rail cars and whites could use the other. And this was the notorious separate but equal decision. And Plessy also said in passing that not only can you have separate rail cars, but of course you could have separate schools. There would be no violation of the principle of equal protection of the laws. So unfortunately in this country, the vision of the Iowa Supreme Court in Clark didn't become the reality until 1954 when we had the case of Brown versus Board of Education, and the U.S. Supreme Court declared that school segregation was unconstitutional. The third case I'm going to talk about involves Ms. Koger, who was an African-American school teacher who wanted to take a boat ride across the Mississippi from Keokuk to Quincy, Illinois. In this case, now we're up to 1873, so we're still fairly soon after the Civil War. She first tried to buy a first-class ticket on the boat that would include meals, and she was refused. She was told that only white people could get that ticket. So she bought a ticket without meals, and she got on the boat, and then tried to buy a separate ticket for dinner. She was handed the ticket, and it had written on it, "Colored Girl." And she was told she would not get to sit in the dining room, but she'd be seated wherever the clerk wanted her to sit, such as in the pantry. So she took that ticket back, refused that, and got her money back. She then got, according to the court's opinion, a gentleman to buy a dinner ticket for her. And at dinner time, she took that ticket into the dining room and showed up at the ladies' table. And at this point, I'm going to read from the opinion as to what happens. This is the request was for her to leave the table and take her meal on the guards or in the pantry. I don't know what on the guards is, but I suspect it's not the best part of the ship. She refused, and thereupon the captain of the boat was sent for, who repeated the request. And being denied compliance, he proceeded by force to remove her from the table and cabin of the boat. She resisted, so that considerable violence was necessary to drag her out of the cabin. And in the struggle, the covering of the table was torn off and dishes broken, and the officer received a slight injury. It was much of an injury. Anyhow, she sued for not being permitted to sit at the table with the white passengers on the boat. And she won that case at trial. And then the case was appealed to the Iowa Supreme Court, and we upheld her victory. And what our Supreme Court said in this case was, in our opinion, the plaintiff was entitled to the same rights and privileges while upon defendant's boat, which were possessed and exercised by white passengers. These rights and privileges rest upon the equality of all before the law, the very foundation principle of our government. And we relied in large part, partly on the U.S. Constitution, but partly on the following provision of the Iowa Constitution. Article 1, Section 1, the very beginning of our Constitution, which says, all men are by nature free and equal. Now, in the Koger case, in answer to all of this, the steamship company tried to say, well, this is just a private arrangement. This is just a social privilege. We're a private company. We can decide and do what we want to do. And we rejected that argument. We said, it cannot be doubted that she was excluded from the table and cabin because of prejudice entertained against her race growing out of its former condition of servitude. We added, we are disposed to construe these laws according to their spirit, so that equal rights and equal protection shall be secured to all regardless of color and nationality. And this decision, this Koger decision, where we ruled in favor of Ms. Koger, was so far ahead of its time, I think, that it didn't really become the law of our nation until 1964, when Congress passed the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which outlawed this kind of discrimination in public accommodations. That is, any accommodation that's open to the public. You may say you're a private business, but if you're opening your business to the public, you can't engage in discrimination. That legislation, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, came into effect in large part because the efforts of the man we honor today, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I won't pretend that our court didn't have some bumps in the road. If you go further in our case law and look at some of the decisions in the latter part of the 19th century, some of the ones in the early 20th century, we had some decisions that in the area of civil rights regressed. But with the passage of time, I think we can certainly look back proudly on these three decisions. And we can especially look proudly upon the courage of these three individuals, Robert, Clark, and Koger, who brought these decisions that we remember today as we remember Dr. King. Thank you for inviting me to speak this afternoon. Questions? Doesn't have to be on these cases, but it can be. Yes?
One of the more famous Iowa court cases I know about is Tinker versus Des Moines that went all the way to the Supreme Court. And it just popped in my head, I'd never heard what happened in the Iowa Supreme Court. Did it go through that at all? Or was it something that was in the federal courts?
I believe that case went through the federal courts. It was it was brought in federal court, went to the 8th Circuit, which is our federal court of appeals for this part of the country, and then to the Iowa Supreme Court. Tinker is the armband case. They were high school students. I'm familiar with it because it's my local high school in Roseville, and my daughters went in Des Moines. They to protest the Vietnam War, some students wore armbands, and the question, and the school, I think, suspended them for doing so. So the question was it a matter of civil rights? Did they have a First Amendment right to wear these armbands? Or was it something that the school could prohibit? And the Supreme Court, in that case, ruled for the students and basically set forth the rule that we still apply in schools, which is there is a right of free speech in schools, but not so long as not to the extent it disrupts the educational mission. So that if the school can show that it needs to do something for purposes of the educational mission, it can exercise that authority, but otherwise, students have a right of free speech in the school. Yes?
What year did voting for African Americans come in Iowa?
That's a good question, and I would assume, I assume it came as part of the 15th Amendment, because we actually, our Constitution dates from 1857, the one that we live under today. There was an 1844 version, 1846 version. We still operate today under the 1857 Constitution. And there is actually a pretty robust constitutional history. There are 2 volumes that are about 1,000 pages long of debates over the Iowa Constitution. You can go and read them, and I've read a lot of them because I've had to for work that I've done on the court. But I believe that we didn't, I could be wrong, but I believe that we did not adopt universal suffrage that would extend to African Americans in the 1857 Constitution, which meant that it took until the 15th Amendment after the Civil War when the voting rights was granted by the U.S. Constitution to all men. It didn't come to women. Other questions? Yes.
Civil rights is an ongoing issue, obviously. As you look ahead, what areas do you see in the next 5 to 10 years are areas that are likely to be addressed by the court as key questions related to today's civil rights issues?
What are some key areas? And I have to be a little bit careful because I am not allowed to kind of comment directly or indirectly on things that come before our court. But I think that one area that we have seen a fair amount of, just speaking about an area in our court, is the area of disability rights and the rights of people with disabilities. An area that we've also seen in terms of racial discrimination in that area of civil rights is the question of implicit bias. There is substantial literature out there that people operate, that they have implicit biases that they may not even be aware of, but that exist, and that the goal of this area of study is to eliminate those implicit biases and to try to have decision-making that is truly neutral. And that's an area that we have seen raised in our court as well in the civil rights area. So those are a couple areas that I think we're going to see more of. Other questions? Yes.
Yes, Justice Mansfield, you're here in the district courtroom. Could you talk a little about the importance of courtroom security? And
you have here in Floyd County, as in most counties, basically an open courthouse. I mean, if it's business hours, the courthouse is open, anybody can walk in and out. And I suspect that's the way it's pretty much always been here. Unfortunately, there have been a couple of recent incidents, one in Jackson County, one in Warren or Madison County, I believe, and where incidents of violence have occurred inside the courthouse. And that is creating a situation where we need to look carefully at the model of just open access, because I used to think it was, things haven't really changed, but now I think people see things, there's social media, there's television, people see things happen and then maybe they want to act out those things. And I'm concerned, as are my colleagues, about the potential for people getting hurt while they're trying to either do their job here or trying to visit here and conduct business here. And so I expect that there's going to be some attention spent in this legislative session and in this coming year to issue courthouse security to improve it. Because perhaps the old model of just the open courthouse where everyone can walk in and out, no screening, no personnel present to check you as you go in and out, perhaps some change. Yes.
Is there, can you comment on, is there in sentencing guidelines, a certain built-in unfairness versus, between different racial groups, particularly we're talking, you know, any, well, the drug laws, some of that's been addressed here and there, federal level. Do you see any of, the inherent unfairness in the sentencing that should be dealt with?
We have in Iowa, we have a problem where, and the Chief Justice, my colleague, addressed this in his speech to the legislature last week. We have a problem where the disproportionate number of people serving time in prison in Iowa are African Americans. And we need to get to the bottom of the problem. One potential issue that's been raised is the one you raised. That is, are the sentences disproportionate or disparate for different crimes? For example, in the federal context, there was a very serious concern that some of the crack cocaine sentences were very disproportionate to other drug sentences. In our system, the trial judges don't have a great deal of discretion often as to what the sentence will be. That's prescribed by the legislature. And one piece that I think we need to look at is, in our legislative system of sentencing, are there sentences that are disproportionate, which is the question. But certainly, we need, within the judicial branch, to look at the issue too, to do what we can do.
And that's something the legislature has to address, or is there a backdoor way to?
Well, I'm probably, yeah. I think, I don't know, but I don't want to talk about backdoor ways, because if we're talking about lawsuits, then we're commenting on cases, and I can't go there. So, but I will say we're looking at it. Yes?
I have one back to the kids. So for February in the school systems for our Black History Month, is that something we can bring up for having for the whole month instead of one day?
To bring up what? You mean to
For Black History Month?
make it a whole month instead of a day?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or whenever they run into it in the books?
Mm-hmm.
Can we make it like most systems? I am from down south and we have a whole Black History Month.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see what you're saying. Right. To make it a whole month as opposed to just one day devoted to Black history.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that would be something I think that the school board should take up. Again, I'm not going to talk about backdoor ways or anything like that, but that would be something I think the decision of the school board and the school administration. Yes?
In regard to the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, the Roberts Court, they recently reviewed and partially nullified the voting rights. I understand they've also decided to hear something about legislation that was passed in the wake of Martin Luther King's assassination. Do you know anything about that and what's likely to happen at the level of the United States Supreme Court?
No, I don't know anything about the second thing you're speaking of. The Voting Rights Act, you're correct. There was a decision a couple of years ago by the U.S. Supreme Court that ended up invalidating a part of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Anything else? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Justice Mansfield, and thanks for all those great questions. Justice Mansfield, on behalf of Wallace and Floyd County, I'd like to present to you a little gift.
Thank you very much.
This is the old historic courthouse in St. Louis. Judge Mansfield referred to the Dred Scott case. this is where the Dred Scott case was tried. And we're just going to kind of give it to Judge Mansfield, and then he's going to give it back to us. Because I didn't get all my homework done this past week. This is a 3D puzzle, and it was a little bit too hard for me to put together, but I've been assured that the students up at Charles City High School, Mr. Al, in your shop class out there, and he's going to take care of this, and we're going to present this to you when it's completed. So thank you very much. At this time, we're going to have a showing of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. Now, all of you students know all about this, right? Right? Because this is one of the things that we all talked about. And as I mentioned when I was in the schools, and the other elected officials did too, this is black and white television. This is not HD. This is the way it was back in 1963. So, with no further ado, this is Martin Luther King at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, August 28, 1963.
At this time, I have the honor to present to you the moral leader of our nation. I have the pleasure to present to you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. Five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summit of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until that is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But that is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protests to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. And they have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our body is heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. And some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities. Knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friend, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. And this will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, my country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring. And when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Well, it's pretty hard to call that. But students, I'd like you to do something for me that I've asked you before. You put your hands and your fingers together like this. Now you remember what that is? Will somebody tell me? What is this? Remember, students, what does this stand for? Okay, it stands for the letter A. All are one in America. And then we went like this. Doesn't matter if you're black, white, yellow, rich, poor, old, young, gay, straight. We're all in it together, right? Thank you very much. time, we will be going downstairs to hang these 3 documents, and they'll be hung by the students. And so we'll dismiss from the courtroom. We'll go down to the 2nd floor, and after that, we're going to come back up here for cake and refreshments. We'll see you on the 2nd floor.
Well, this looks like it's already been planned, so would you please introduce yourself to us?
I'm Jen Wandrow.
You're Genevieve Wandrow.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to meeting you. Thank you. Let me tell you why. When this all came together, Janice Berglund came here to arrange all this with Denny Haar, and we got inspired by the work of the students. And I wanted to mention Genevieve Wandrow's essay, because it led to a placement of part of the display, and if I can read from it. Genevieve writes, African Americans were treated so bad. They couldn't eat in the same restaurants, couldn't go to the same schools, couldn't drink out of the same drinking fountains. So that is the reason that we placed this life history of Martin Luther King above the drinking fountain here in the Floyd County Courthouse. Because you can come get a drink here if you're black or white, and you can learn about Martin Luther King. Thank you so much, Genevieve.
Yeah.
And what is your name?
I'm Carissa Jensen.
It's nice to have you here. Thank you so much. And your name?
Connor O'Donnell.
Connor. And where are you from?
I'm from North Springs.
Well, thank you for being here. Well, let's try to, we've got a couple more remarks, but before we hang, we want to talk about the display and what it means and why things were chosen. We had schools from Rudd Rockford, Marble Rock, the Warriors, Central Springs. What's your mascot?
The Panthers.
The Panthers. And your school colors are blue and white, right?
Blue and black.
Blue and black. That's why we have blue on the walls, to mark the school colors. And obviously the reason we have orange is for the Charles City Comets. So that explains the colors. One of the things that as this all came together, and it really did come together in the past week, 10 days, a couple of things I really have to point out. When you get the chance, read these essays. They're all wonderful. We couldn't put them all on the walls. We had way too many. But I just want to mention one that was particularly interesting to me, and that was Danica H. And I believe Danica was from Central Springs. Is that right? Yep. Well, Danica was listening so intently when we presented there. She has a caricature as half of Martin Luther King, half of Abe Lincoln. And she was paying so much attention. She not only got Abe Lincoln's top hat, but we said that Abe Lincoln was 6 foot 6 inches tall. So if you look, the sleeve on the left side is longer than the one on the right. We thank you, students, for paying attention. There's many other things here on the wall you'll look at and when you have some time. But I think now it's time to hang the prints. So go ahead. Let's give it a try. This one goes over here. Excuse me. Janice knows this one goes over here, and the center goes there, and Genevieve, you go on that side. There we go. Sorry about that. There you go. Let me help you with this one. How's that look? How's that look? Students, thank you very much. Well, is Marilee Monroe here? Marilee, wave. Okay. Marilyn Monroe is our former county recorder, and she would love to take any group of you on a tour of the courthouse. We're very sorry that you can't go to the sheriff's office and go to the jail. But there's many offices here. Mary Lee will introduce you to some of the elected officials. And so meet Mary Lee. Where should we meet, Mary Lee? In front
Just
of...
watch for the white bear. We're in the
Okay.
white bear.
If you'd like a tour. And if you do me one more favor, I'd like all the students and the teachers who came with them to pose on the steps. We're going to get one more photograph. If you get on these steps that lead upstairs, please. Come on, students.